Okay, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. This meeting will come to order. Welcome to the June 12th, 2023 regular meeting of the Land Use and Transportation Committee of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I am Supervisor Mirna Melgar, Chair of the committee, joined by Vice Chair Supervisor Dean Preston and Board of Supervisors President Aaron Peskin. The committee clerk today is Stephanie Cabrera. Thank you, Stephanie, for helping us out. I would also like to acknowledge G. Michael Baltazar and Jaime Echeverri at SFGov TV for staffing this meeting. Madam Clerk, do you have any announcements?
Yes, thank you. The Board of Supervisors and its committees are now convening hybrid meetings that allow in-person attendance and public comment, while still providing remote access and public comment via telephone. Public comment will be taken on each item on this agenda. Those attending in person will be allowed to speak first, then we will take those who are on the telephone line. When connected, you will hear meeting discussions, but you will be muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up and public comment is called, those joining us in person should line up to speak, and those on the telephone should dial *3 to also be added to the speaker queue. If you are on your telephone, please remember to turn down your TV and all listening devices you may be using. You may submit public comment in writing in either of the following ways. Email them to the Land Use and Transportation Clerk at Erica, erica.major, major, at sfgov.org. You may also send your written comments via U.S. Postal Service to our office in City Hall at 1 Dr. Carlton B. Goodlett Place, room 244, San Francisco, California, 94102. Finally, items acted upon today are expected to appear on the Board of Supervisors agenda of June 27th unless otherwise stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we dive into the meeting, I just wanted to announce that this is the last Land Use and Transportation Committee that we're going to have in a while. Next week is Juneteenth. The week after that is the day of public comment on our budget, which I predict will be hot and heavy. And then the week after that is the 4th of July holiday. So our next meeting will be on July 10th. And just keep that in mind. Okay, Madam Clerk, call item number 1, please.
Yes, item number 1 is an ordinance amending the Planning and Building Codes, Commercial to Residential, Adaptive Reuse, and Downtown Economic Revitalization. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. The system prompt will indicate that you have raised your hand. Please wait until the system indicates that you have been unmuted, and you may begin your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. President Peskin, thank you so much for your work on this item. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Melgar and Supervisor Preston. We discussed this last week and made some amendments that necessitated an additional week and additional public comment. In the intervening week, a number of additional amendments have sprung up, and relative to what you just said, Chair Melgar, which is that we will not be having another Land Use Committee meeting for some time. What I'd like to do is sort through those amendments, anything that is not substantive, to put into today's legislation and send to the full board for hearing tomorrow, and anything that is substantive or even requires re-referral to duplicate and take up in July, or if necessary, after the Planning Commission has taken them up. So let me see if I'll sort. The reason we are waiting for you, Deputy City Attorney Pearson, is so that I don't mess this up and make sure the ones that are substantive are dealt with in the amendment to the duplicated file. So we have the following as suggested by the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. We have, let me pull them up, and I think you all have them as well. Some changes that encompass an increase to thresholds for large projects subject to commercial and residential ratios in the C3O, the addition of portions of the C2 to sign permitting, which those, Madam City Attorney, are those you would deem to be substantive, I presume?
Deputy City Attorney Ann Pearson, yes, I would.
And then the things that OEWD brought forward, Mr. Bentliff, the off-street loading, curb cuts for vehicular access, do you deem those to be substantive?
I do.
Okay, and do you think any of those three require re-referral?
I think all three do.
Okay, well, we can argue about that later. Um, but it doesn't matter because we will put all of those in the duplicated file. Then I believe I have two that are non-substantive, one of which, Madam City Attorney, you are not aware of yet, so I'm going to spring it on you in a minute. But first is in Section 102 definitions, and in Section 210.5, a mirror provision. So in Section 102 definitions, to add other than hotel use, so it would read commercial to residential adaptive reuse shall mean to change the use of an existing gross floor area from a non-residential use other than hotel use. And the mirror component to that in 210.5 would read a commercial and residential adaptive reuse project is a project that includes a change of use of any existing gross floor area from a non-residential use excluding hotel use. And those have been reviewed and approved as to form by Deputy City Attorney Austin Yang, who reported that those were non-substantive. So I would like to amend those into the original file.
That's right.
And then finally, I would like to suggest, and this is new to you, Deputy City Attorney, that we, as a matter of clarification, and this has to do with non-conforming neon signs. This is page 39, line 4, currently reads, a non-conforming neon sign may be physically detached from the building for any required repairs or maintenance. I would like to remove the word non-conforming, Madam Deputy City Attorney, so that there is no question that a conforming or non-conforming sign can be physically detached from the building. I don't think that is substantive.
I'd like to have a minute just to read through it.
Okay.
So I can do that as you otherwise discuss. Do you have discussion on this matter? So I can.
We have that in public comment,
so
and I
let me
don't
take a
know
look.
if Mr. Bentliff or anybody else would like to testify as to this item, but what I would propose to do is to make the hotel use definition, and subject to Ms. Pearson's review, delete the word non-conforming and make those to the original file, and then duplicate and make the other three amendments to the duplicated file for more public comment and hopefully not re-referral.
Sounds good. Madam City Attorney, is it okay, Deputy City Attorney, is it okay if we do public comment while
Yes,
you
it
are
is.
researching this? Okay, let's do that then. Madam Clerk, let's go to public comment on this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any members of the public in the chamber that would like to speak to this item? Please line up along the curtain wall to your right. For members that are joining us remotely, please dial *3 now to be added to the queue. Are there any members of the public here in the chamber? Seeing none, we'll check our online callers. There are currently 4 listening with 0 in the speaking queue.
Okay, well, with that, public comment on this item is now closed. Do we need to come back to this item at some point later in the agenda?
If you could, I'd appreciate it. Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's do that. We'll come back and consider the motion to amend and then duplicate at a later time in the agenda. Madam Clerk, let's go on to item number 2, please.
Item number 2 is an ordinance amending the planning code to exempt eligible commercial to residential adaptive reuse projects from development impact fees, with the exception of inclusionary housing requirements, affirming the Planning Department's determination under the California Environmental Quality Act, making findings of consistency with the general plan and the 8 priority policies of the Planning Code, Section 101. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment, please dial *3 When the system prompt indicates that you have raised your hand, please wait until the system indicates that you have been unmuted, and you may begin your comments when we go to public comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We have Madison Tam here from Supervisor Dorsey's office, who is the sponsor of this legislation. Welcome, Ms. Tam.
Thank you, Chair Melgar. Just one quick amendment for the committee to consider, and this was circulated earlier on page 6, line 8, taking the suggestion of President Peskin and keeping in line with the content of the first item you heard today. We will be adding or asking you to please amend it to say the waiver in this subsection shall apply only to applications to establish residential uses as part of a commercial to residential adaptive reuse project submitted on or before December 31st, 2028. And then Madam Chair will also be respectfully asking for this item to be continued to the call of the chair while we do some additional work on making sure that the impact of this legislation is as strong as we would like it to be.
Okay, so to the call of the chair. Okay.
Thank you.
I will make a motion that we amend this as spoken into the record, and we will take that up after public comment.
Are there members of the public present that would like to speak to this item? Please line up along the curtain wall to your right. For those joining us remotely, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. Seeing no in-person public comment, we'll look online, where we continue to hold at 4-0.
Okay, public comment on this item is now closed. Okay, so I made the motion that we take the amendment as spoken into the record and then continue it to the call of the chair.
On the motion to accept the amendments as spoken into the record and continue item to the call of the chair, Member Peskin, Vice Chair Preston. I apologize. Preston, aye. Vice Chair Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Thank you so much. That motion passes. Okay. Before you call item number 3, let's hear from the city attorney about item number 1. Oh, okay.
I had hoped to, we're not quite there yet.
Okay. All right, sounds good. I'm sorry. Let's go on to number 3 then, Madam Clerk, please.
Thank you. Item number 3 is an ordinance amending the Park Code to authorize Recreation and Park Commission to cause the Park Code to apply to specific properties, and it's authorized the Recreation and Park Department to lease or operate for recreational purposes. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment to this item, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. The system prompt will indicate that you have raised your hand. Please wait until the system indicates that you have been unmuted, and you may begin your comments when we go to public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I see Mr. Tom Paulino from the Mayor's Office here to present. Welcome, Mr. Paulino.
Thank you, Chair Melgar, Supervisor Preston, and Supervisor Peskin. My name is Tom Paulino from the Mayor's Office. Here to request that the committee consider and adopt 2 non-substantive amendments. We circulated them around both digitally and to the clerk earlier today. But on page 2, line 1, the reference to OCII should instead be changed to the real estate division, as the property that's referenced there, Yerba Buena Gardens, has since transferred to real estate. And on page 4, line 6, it would help to add the words, quote, or maintaining after the word operating. But the ordinance itself in front of you amends the Park Code to authorize the Rec and Park Commission to cause the Park Code to apply to specified properties it has authorized the Recreation and Park Department to lease or operate for recreational purposes. And if the committee has any questions, Stacy Bradley from Rec Park Capital and Planning Division is here, as well as for a presentation.
Here it is.
Welcome, Ms. Stacy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Melgar, President Peskin, and Supervisor Preston. I will be very quick on our presentation. Tom already gave a good overview. My name is Stacy Bradley. I'm the Capital and Planning Director at Rec and Park. This item was identified when we were updating an existing lease from 1970 with Caltrans over a portion of the Selby-Paloux Mini Park. This lease is before your colleagues at the Budget and Finance Committee. It came to our attention that Earlier amendments required project-specific amendments when the property that Rec and Park is operating and maintaining is not under the jurisdiction of the Recreation and Park Commission, and each park that was added was then added in a project-specific amendment, such as Soma West Skate Park and Dog Park, also owned by Caltrans and operated by the Rec and Park Commission. We wanted to have a broader, more holistic view so that any park that is operated and maintained by the Recreation and Park Commission is the park code also applies. So the modification is a relatively small, minor modification to the definition of park, and then so that any future park that Rec and Park would operate and maintain, if not under the jurisdiction of the Rec and Park Commission, the park code would continue to apply. I'm available for any questions if you have any, and as is Tom and my other colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Do we have Supervisor Preston?
Thank you, Chair Melgar. I'm just curious if you have the list of the properties that would be impacted, specifically the DPW-owned ones. There's a reference to 10 community gardens, 3 mini parks that are DPW properties.
Yes, so we operate and maintain Public Works' most of their gardens, so not all of them, but most of them. There's the Arkansas Friendship Garden, the Arlington Community Garden, Clipper Terrace, Connecticut Friendship Garden, Dearborn Community Garden, Good Prospect Community Garden, Hooker Alley, Ogden Terrace, Park Street Garden, and both White Crane Springs and Wolf Lane. They're all under Public Works jurisdiction. Most of them, if not all, are within former rights-of-ways that we are operating and maintaining.
Thank you. And the 3 Public Works-owned mini parks?
Yes, they are. There's the Broadway Tunnel East Mini Park. There's also Brotherhood Chester, and let me see, where's the last one? Fillmore and Turk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Bradley, is there anybody here from DPW?
No, we didn't ask them to join.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what they think, if this is going to affect them.
It won't affect them in any way. It doesn't affect anything on the ground. It'll apply to all future leases that the Rec and Park Commission authorizes.
So this doesn't retroactively?
It doesn't retroactively change anything, but it could. We need to have the park code apply though when the Rec and Park Commission is authorizing the park department to operate.
Yeah, sorry, Supervisor Perez, it's just that there's several, pieces of land in District 7 that are owned by DPW, and they act as parks. And the DPW has been great to deal with. Not that you wouldn't be, but it's just different. It's a different set of rules, and so I'm just wondering how that'll affect DPW, but also the neighbors.
It won't affect them if Public Works is continuing to operate and maintain. It's only when Rec and Park takes over the operations and maintenance of the spaces.
Okay. Supervisor Preston.
Thank you, Chair Melgar. And I just wanted to follow up on it. Was not aware that the Fillmore Mini Park, the Turk and Fillmore, is subject to this. Would love to get more clarity on what, at a practical matter, what that means for that site, given that site's currently undergoing a pretty significant renovation.
Yes.
Then is going to reopen. It's one that the community has been very much watching, involved in, and it's been a loss during this temporary period when the park's unavailable. So I don't know if you can speak to that.
I can,
now,
yeah. It
or,
really won't make any change because we do, the Rec and Park Commission does, the department does operate and maintain Fillmore Turk. So people who engage in the park, when they go to the park, they have, it's unclear that the park code doesn't quite apply yet, right? So we wanted to make sure that the park code is applied across the board when the department is operating and maintaining the parks.
Right. I think I get that, and at some level that intuitively makes sense. Saying the park code applies or doesn't apply. If I'm a member of the public who lives near that park,
Right.
I don't know what that
You just
means.
assume that,
and I'm
right.
sitting here trying to figure out what is that. Like in terms of the various things that folks use the park for, whether that is, getting a permit to, be able to distribute or have food there on that day, or like all those rules that apply. What changes? And I know this is very open-ended because it's an entire code that now applies.
Well, it really doesn't change because we had all assumed that the park code did apply. It was only during this lease negotiation that it became clear that there were some areas that didn't quite apply. So we wanted to make that legislative change so that the park code does apply uniformly to all parks that Rec and Park operates and maintains.
Thank you. Yeah, I was under the same misimpression.
Yeah, exactly. It was
that
surprising
sounds
to
like
us
everyone
when-
was. I think so. So the expectation would be that whatever rules were in place previously,
It would be the same.
Would be the same
Yeah.
in terms of the public use of the park.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Bradley, I do have a question, just because this is new, and I maybe my staff got briefed, I didn't, I don't, and so I'm a little bit wary of unintended consequences for District 7 in particular, just because, so I hear you that it doesn't apply to areas. I just don't know what the consequences are. We're working on a whole bunch of stuff around open space, DPW land, PUC land, and for acquisition, things go through Prozac. I just don't know how it affects my district, and so. Would it be a terrible imposition if we continued this until we're all up to speed and Supervisor Preston and I have our questions answered? Or does this really mess you up if we don't get this out of here today?
It would be really helpful to get it out of here today. They're really, for your district and all districts, it won't feel any different to park goers. And the legislative change is so that we don't need to bring back and make one-off changes when the department is going to be operating and maintaining land.
No, I hear you, and
Yeah.
I trust you when you say
Yeah.
that. That it's my responsibility
understand, of
to
course.
do it for District 7 and to
Of
make sure
course.
that I'm feeling very out of depth in understanding the repercussions. Is there a deadline that you need to meet, or is it?
No, I mean, it could be continued if,
Okay.
of course, if
All right,
you
let's
wanted
take
to.
public comment and then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any members of the public in the chamber that would like to speak to this item? Please line up along the curtain wall to your right. For our remote public call-in members, please dial *3 to be added to the queue. Seeing no in-person comment, we'll check in with Mr. Echeverri to see how many callers we have. We have 4 in the listening queue with 1 in the speaker queue. May we please have the speaker?
I'm sorry.
Great. David Pilpel. I assume you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so on this item, I would ask for the opinion of Prozac. I would require Rec Park to post both a list of additional property subject to this code requirement and a map of that property on their website. I have not found on their website a complete list of property that they own or control, and it would be difficult to go through commission resolutions to determine what property has become subject to the park code by way of this code provision. The park code also has existing language in 3.01 and 3.02 that allows the department to enforce its provisions, but it's a bit circular, and right now the rules and regulations of either the commission or the department are not posted on the website, nor are general manager directives that relate to property use and rules and regs there. So the bottom line is, I think Rec Park should have to post the additional property under this proposed code section or change, rules and regulations and general manager directives on their website. It doesn't seem like this is an urgent item. If you're considering continuing it to the call of the chair in committee, alternatively, you could report this out of committee and ask that these, or think about addressing these concerns before this gets to the full board. So I just think this is an opportunity for some additional sunshine and transparency around Rec Park on an otherwise relatively straightforward item. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you for your comments today. We're checking to see if there are any other callers. And there are no additional callers in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Public comment on this item is now closed. So, Ms. Bradley.
Sure, could I just make one comment about
Sure,
the lease that will be before your colleagues does rely on this legislative amendment to have the park code apply. We didn't make the one-off change for the lease to apply to Selby Paloo because we were making this broader legislative change.
And I'm sorry, when is the lease coming before
I
us?
believe it will be this month. The lease is expected to go into effect on July 1st. I don't think it's calendared for this week at Budget and Finance, but perhaps next week.
Okay. I will speak with the Chair of Finance. This is what I will say to you. What we can do is, I'm sorry that we don't have a Land Use and Transportation Committee for a while. We can put it at the next earliest, which is the 10th, and then have it go as a committee report. I just think there's enough questions that have been brought up about that, and also the call for transparency in terms of the list, posting it publicly, answering the questions that both Supervisor Preston and I have, and I would like to talk to DPW about it as well.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one other
Yes, please.
question. I think it would also just be helpful for us all to understand this is relative to Public Works, but not all properties are necessarily under their jurisdiction, as we know, OCII, others, is what it would look like from a permit fee perspective to users. So is there a different permit fee for activation, for putting up string lights, for encroachment permits? So I think it would be good to understand that.
Sure. Right, and we have been operating under the premise that all of the parks under Rec and Park Commission, where we have been operating and maintaining, that there is no change here because we had already assumed that the park code applied, and it was just identified that we needed to make these code modifications. So for a user, there's no change right now for the park code fees, which are entrenched in the park code. But we can definitely show the difference between what Public Works is and...
So what you're saying is that right now when you lease, operate, maintain a non-Rec and Park titled property, you are currently assessing Rec and Park code fees to users of that?
Yes.
And arguably without authority to do so. Got it. All right. Sorry, Deputy City Attorney, just saying.
Okay, so I make a motion that we continue this item until July 10th.
On the motion to continue this item to July 10th, Vice Chair Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Member Preston. Preston, aye. Chair Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Madam Clerk, let's go to item number 4, please.
Would you like to call 4 and 5 together?
Oh, sorry. Yes, items number 4 and 5 together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 4 is an ordinance amending the building and planning codes to create a temporary amnesty program for unpermitted awnings that streamlines the application process to legalize awnings, waives applicable fees, and confers legal nonconforming status for awnings that do not comply with the planning code. Item number 5 is an ordinance amending the planning, building, and fire codes to codify an annual waiver of awning replacement fees and awning sign fees applied for during the month of May, to annually waive fees for new awning installations applied for during the month of May, and to indicate that the planning code, building, and fire code waivers pertaining to pedestrian street lighting, as well as awning placement, awning installation, and awning sign fees are keyed to permit application in May rather than permit issuance in May. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment on these items, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. The system prompt will indicate that you have raised your hand. Please wait until the system indicates that you have been unmuted, and you may begin your comments when we go to public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, I'm really sorry. I was just going along with your instructions. I don't think items 4 and 5 are related. Yeah, I don't think they are. Maybe, I'm not sure what the procedure is to recall item 5 once it's been called. I would like to take them separately because I don't think...
That'll be fine, and I'll just recall item 5 when we go to item 5.
Let's do that. Let's just hear an item 4 for now. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Mulgar. I do believe that President Peskin has just some opening remarks related to the program. Thank you.
President Peskin, I think you have a series of amendments and proposals.
I do, on behalf of my partner in this project, Mayor Breed, and myself, which have been distributed to you colleagues that are non-substantive in nature, are substantive in nature and would require a 1-week continuance, which is the 5-year look-back provision, which, Mr. Polino, we will do here on the fly. I think, so let me just speak to the 4 amendments, colleagues. One is the 5-year look-back provision, which I believe is substantive. The other provisions limiting the program to business signs, i.e. not general advertising signs, commonly known as billboards, I believe is non-substantive. And signs that participate need to comply with the planning department's existing illumination rules. I believe, and I'm, Ms. Jensen, are you playing Deputy City Attorney Pearson on TV?
I am, in fact.
Okay. Would you concur in my last statement that limiting the program to business signs, not general advertising, is not substantive?
I do concur.
Okay. Would you agree that requiring that signs that participate in the program need to comply with the illumination rules is not substantive?
Tentatively, let me take a quick look at the exact language.
Okay.
As described, yes, but I need to make sure.
Okay, and I can read it to you, and I believe it is before you and my colleagues. And then these are all modifications that were suggested, and rightfully so. Thank you, Planning Department, by the Planning Department. They were all good, and I thought them to be sensible, as did the mayor, which is why these amendments are before us. The last one is that applicants don't need to provide professionally prepared plans, which is really a clarification. I don't think that's substantive, because that was certainly the intent. This is just clarifying language to that end. So what I would suggest, given that I would like the Amnesty program to start sooner rather than later, is that we do the good old duplicate the file and continue the 5-year look back to our July 10th meeting, and that can catch up. And meanwhile, we will have an amnesty program that goes into effect a month earlier. So that, I haven't had a chance to discuss that with you, Mr. Polino, but if that is acceptable to Mayor Breed, I would hope it would be acceptable to my colleagues.
It would be acceptable to us, President Peskin. And just to clarify, I guess procedurally, it's to amend the existing file, duplicate it, and add the 5-year look-back amendment to the duplicate.
Right. So I would amend the existing file with the 3 soon, hopefully to be determined by Deputy City Attorney Jensen, non-substantive amendments, then duplicate the file, add the 4th.
I can give you my confirmation now so that you don't have to wait. It's just the 5-year look back that's substantive.
We are in agreement. This non-attorney agrees. Should we hear from the department?
Thank you, Chair Preskin, Audrey Merloni, Planning Department staff. I won't reiterate the amendments that are already being incorporated into one or both ordinances. The Planning Commission additionally recommended expanding the types of permits that qualify for the planning fee waiver to include any permit whose scope of work is exclusively related to non-residential awnings or business signs, unless the building is subject to Article 11 or the awning or sign permit is subject to neighborhood notification. And we also recommended various technical amendments that I would presume are non-substantive. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Polino, you don't need to keep bouncing around, just use that. Do you want to regale, as to the technical, non-monetary amendments that were also the subject of the department's or the commission's recommendations, any reason that those were not, or are they otherwise included? I see the amendments, but I don't know if you included the other technical material that Ms. Merloni spoke to.
Thank you for the question, President Peskin. Not in the summary that I dispersed to the committee, but acceptable to us.
I'm sorry, but?
Acceptable to us, the amendments that Ms. Melanie just outlined.
So those are before us or are not?
They were not included, I'm sorry, in the summary that I had sent. But in the most updated version, correct me if I'm wrong, Audrey, if they were included in that version that was circulated.
I have not seen the most updated version, but I do believe most of these technical amendments could come back in the duplicated file if we prefer to do it that way.
Okay, and then on fees, we get into this slippery slope that I am painfully aware of in a different venue, which is CEOP. I'm totally changing gears here, and I'm going to the Department of Building Inspection. And I've said this a number of times in this committee and in fiscal committees of the board, which is a long, long time ago, Proposition 13 passed in the state of California, and San Francisco, under the tutelage of then Deputy City Attorney Buck Delventhal, led the way in replacing ad valorem tax dollars with fee dollars, and we became, in large part, a fee-dependent city. Recently, we've had economic challenges, and so this government is being asked repeatedly to waive fees for all manner of things, which this supervisor and my colleagues have been quite willing to do because it's tough times. But that comes with a real impact. And so I think, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying that we need to consider what the economic impacts are each and every time we do this, which doesn't mean that we won't come to the conclusion that it's the right thing to do, but these are departments that do their business and maintain their staff in large part with these fees. So I think we have to be cognizant of, and I don't want to add more work to you, but I mean, one of the notes I made this weekend when I was reading these things, as to both of these items, and I am a proud co-sponsor of item number 4, and I indicated at the last meeting that I fully intend to vote for item number 5. But I think that it is incumbent upon us to ask the question, how much is this worth? And it's a educated guess, but if it's worth a half a full-time equivalent position, if it's worth cumulatively 2 FTE, we need to know that that's what's happening. That's exactly what's driving the CEOP problem at DBI or driving it in part, is that as we, out of the goodness of our hearts, waive various fees, they have less money to hire the staff to do the things that are fundamentally important around code enforcement. So I just think it's a conversation we ought to be having. I'm not saying no, but I think when your commission makes these recommendations to this policy body, it should probably come with and by the way, we are cognizant of the fact that this is worth $200,000 a year or it's de minimis. Anyway, sorry, Ms. Merloni, for that.
Thank you, Chair Preskin. We did check with our finance division about the impact of waiving the planning fees, not Department of Building Inspection, since we have no jurisdiction over their budget. And our finance division did come back and say, because this is a temporary program and these fees are very small, that they did not find that it would make a substantive difference or an impactful difference to our budget. So we would like to say that within our technical amendments, we previously were coming at this from a planning department perspective, from the ease of a small business trying to apply for these permits. And in those technical amendments, we did recommend waiving some of the additional Department of Building inspection fees. And since that time, we have learned from Department of Building inspection that this is a much larger fee for them that they rely on. And so we would probably defer to Department of Building inspection for any additional waiver of their fees. But in terms of planning department fees for this type of permit, we did look into it, and it would not have a substantial impact on our budget.
Thank you. Carl.
Carl Nacita, Legislative Affairs Manager for the Department of Building Inspection. So I just wanted to note that the Building Inspection Commission is in full support of the proposed ordinance, but they have not yet considered some of the recommendations by the Planning Department. Thank you, President Peskin, for bringing those up. At a staff level, DVI did have some concerns about a couple of the technical amendments made by the Planning Commission, namely the fee waiver for signs because of the impact that it would have on the department, as well as not requiring professional drawings for signs under the building code. But if those recommendations are adopted in the duplicate file, I believe it will be re-referred to the Building Inspection Commission, where staff can raise those concerns and then bring the Commission's recommendation back to the Land Use Committee.
Supervisor Preston.
Thank you, Chair Melgar, and thank you for the presentations. I just wanted to remind folks there's obviously a lot of context for the reason this legislation was brought forward. I will say in my district, we had, unfortunately, some folks, long-time businesses with signs that had been in place for a long time, we're talking decades, who suddenly were facing notices of violations for not conforming with the various code requirements. I want to express my appreciation to, and I don't know if this is to President Peskin or to the mayor or to both, but for the expansion of this from just awnings to also including a lot of these signs, which I think is absolutely crucial. So thank you for taking prompt action on this, and it's something I fully support. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
And through the chair to Supervisor Preston, I just want to give thanks where thanks is due and acknowledge my former colleague, now the head of the Office of Small Business, Katie Tang, for her work on this, as well as my staff, Calvin Yan.
Okay, let's take public comment on this item, please, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any members of the public who would like to make public comment to this item that are joining us here in the chamber? For our remote call-in members, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. Seeing no speakers in the chamber, we'll check our call-in line. We have 5 callers with 1 speaker in the queue. Mr. Shabetti, may we please have the first caller?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So yeah, just a concerned citizen. I think, building on what President Peskin said, I think it'd be helpful, and this is to the supervisors, to start putting in some structures. Look, in my career, my boss used to tell me the worst thing about solving a problem once is solving it 2 times. I think some rudimentary economic impact for all of these things should be kind of standard. It would be helpful for the public to understand the trade-offs, because in a lot of ways it feels like it's going in one pocket and coming out of the other, particularly when we talk about increasing, and talk about businesses, right? You relieve the awning fee, but then you're charging customers to try to fill a hole for parking significantly, right? So, I would say just the comment of if there's some way, or maybe it's the other budget committee, but it'd be helpful to do at least a little, back of the napkin, helpful to understand the economic impact for a lot of these things that we see, particularly given our fiscal situation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We're looking to see if there are any other callers. There are 0 left in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Public comment on this item is now closed. Supervisor Preston.
Thank you, Chair Melgar. Just following up on my statement before public comment, I'm just noticing that the title here only references awnings, wasn't amended to include reference to signs. I don't know if it's necessary to do so, but would suggest maybe conforming that as well, and I assume that would be non-substantive, sort of offer that as a potential friendly amendment.
Include signs on the title, not just.
Looks like the text got amended, but not the title, so just suggesting we might want to.
It's in the title at line 6 and signs, double underline in what was recently circulated.
Thank you. I missed that. It's not, I see. It's not in the first part, but in the.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Looks good. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think you already made the motion.
I have
President.
not. What
Okay.
I would like to do is to move that we adopt everything other than the 5-year look back to the original legislation. So that would be on page 4, section 3, which is the planning code revisions to section 187.3 of the planning code in subsection B controls to say, or this is line 16, or sign, insert physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the introduction date of this ordinance. Is that the 5-year look back language? Ms. Jensen? Is that non-substantive in nature, the one I just read?
I was following along with you, but I was a couple words behind.
Page 4, line 16, this might be substantive because it changes the effective date to the introduction date. Is that substantive? Controls, notwithstanding any other provision of this code, an awning or sign physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the strike effective and insert introduction date.
I think that is substantive too. Since you're pulling out the 5-year look back, and this is also related to that, do you want to maybe pull them out together?
Yeah, that's exactly, I just realized that as I was saying it. So I will not make that amendment. I will make the amendment further, which is, until Kristen tells me otherwise, is not substantive, on line 20 on page 4, which is not affixed to a building, insert designated as significant or contributory under Article 11, non-substantive, right? Isn't that what Article 11 is?
Yes.
Okay. On page 5, the last part of this subsection B, insert all signs must comply with the illumination provisions of Article 6 of this code. That was language suggested by the Commission. Subsection C, strike at line 12 professionally and say prepared by a state licensed contractor or architect or registered engineer. So in other words, it need not be prepared by a state licensed contractor, architect, or registered engineer. And I think those are the only changes I would make to the original file. Mr. Polino, you agree? I'm not making any mistakes yet?
No, that's correct, President Peskin.
Okay, so I would make that motion without the 5-year look back and without the introduction effective date.
Okay, let's vote on that motion, Madam Clerk,
Okay.
please.
And I'm sorry, will this be moving forward to the full board with those amendments? or
Not
we
yet,
continue?
because I got to duplicate the file before I send it to the full board.
Thank you. So on the motion to amend the file as read into the file, Vice Chair Peskin.
I'm not vice chair.
Vice Chair Preston.
Oh, I apologize.
That's
It's
okay.
incorrect in
It
my
happens all
notes.
the time. It's fine.
Preston's only a chair
Aye.
to me. Aye, thank you, Preston. Aye. Member Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Thank you, that motion passes.
And then, Madam Chair, I would like to duplicate the file that we just amended, add at page 4, subsection B, the language around physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the introduction date. Sorry for being without words. What happened to our limiting the program to business signs language? I think, Ms. Jensen, I actually do have to include in the original file at least part of the language in the first clause in B. I think I do have to, I think you will maybe allow me to include physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the effective date, and the introduction language I can do later because that would be substantive. Are you tracking my? Sorry for doing this on the fly.
Deputy City Attorney Kristen Jensen, I definitely should have had more caffeine this morning, but yes, I believe I'm tracking you, and yes, I think if you leave the language as it exists now in the non-duplicated file, which I think is what you're suggesting.
What I'm saying, so in the original file, I haven't duplicated yet. I was getting ready to duplicate, but I did not include in the original amendment, I did not include the words physically existing on or serving a non-residential business. Here's what I'm asking, Mr. Polino, which is the language that we agreed to, which was, or maybe Ms. Merloni, you can help us, which is the no billboards language, which was a good catch on your part. Where is that?
We just need to write the word business signs in front. I don't have a copy of the newest version of the legislation, but I believe this could be solved by just taking the first part of what you were trying to amend and not taking the language that says existing as of the date of the active date of the ordinance, something along those lines, and only taking the business signs portion.
There's probably a number of ways to skin this cat. You see what we're getting at, Ms. Jensen, is non-general advertising, right? So one way to do it would be, notwithstanding any other provision of this code, an awning or sign existing on a, it's really business sign. Is that a term of art or is that a defined term? I'm sorry for doing this on the floor. Ms. Merloni?
General this is Deputy City Attorney Kristen Jensen, and I'm hoping she was going to say the same thing. General advertising sign is a defined term in the code. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, the other way of skinning this cat would be to say this section of law does not apply to general advertising. That would be a catch-all, and we.
So I'm looking at the original version of the ordinance, but I'm presuming it's pretty much the same. If it's page 4 around line 18 on the original ordinance under B controls, and it would be fixed by saying, notwithstanding any other provision of this code, an awning or business sign existing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and not fixing the language that makes it active, that takes away the 5-year look back. So that would be the non-substantive change to go forward in the non-duplicated file.
So you are saying insert the word business, and business is defined?
It's defined in Article 6 of the Planning Code.
Should we cross-reference that real quick?
Should we come back to this item, President Peskin?
Why don't we come back to that? Maybe Ms. Merloni
Okay,
can
I like
compare
capital
language.
B business if indeed it is a defined term in 6.
May I suggest,
Yeah.
President, that we come back to this item to give you time to cross-reference with Article 6 and make sure that it's as you intend? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Melgar. I think that's a perfect
Okay,
idea.
let's do that. So we will come back to this item. It sounds like we may have a further amendment to the original file before we duplicate and add further amendments to continue. So let's do that and go on to number 5, please, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chair Melgar. Item number 5 is an ordinance amending the planning, building, and fire codes to codify the annual waiver of awning replacement fees and awning signs applied for during the month of May, to annually waive fees for new awning installations applied for during the month of May, and to indicate that the planning code, building, and fire code waivers pertaining to pedestrian street lighting, as well as awning replacement, awning installation, and awning sign fees are keyed to permit application in May rather than permit issuance in May. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment on this item, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. The system prompt will indicate that you have raised your hand. Please wait until the system indicates that you've been unmuted, and you may begin your comments when we go to public comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We have Tita Bell here from Supervisor Engardio, who is sponsoring this item. Welcome, Ms. Bell.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Melgar, Vice Chair Preston, and President Peskin. This file is a duplicate of the newly enacted legislation relating to the May Small Business Month fee waiver program. Last month, the Board of Supervisors expanded the May fee waiver program to new awning installations for 2 years, 2023 and 2024. And Supervisor Engardio would now like to propose amendments to this file to further expand that program to include business signs. It would also be for a limited time of 2 years. This was a recommendation from the Planning Department, and it aligns with the supervisor's goal of making things easier for small businesses. Changes appear throughout the ordinance, and I believe copies were distributed to your offices. They, in effect, add the terms business sign, which is a defined term in the Planning Code in Section 602, I believe. Our office is obviously mindful of the impact of another fee waiver, and we have been in talks with the Department of Building Inspection regarding what the impact might look like. I have some very preliminary numbers from Mr. Nasita that point to sign fees that were collected by DBI last year in 2022. They averaged to about $18,000 per month, and that would include sign fees collected from all types of applicants, not just small businesses. And so this is just the beginning of a conversation that we hope to continue to have with the departments. And what we're asking from the committee today is to adopt these amendments and to continue the matter to the call of the chair so that we can continue to have conversations about economic impact. And we believe this change is substantive, so the file would have to be referred back to the Building Inspection Commission, and we expect that the file will go through some further amendments before coming back to this committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Ms. Flores, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair Melgar. Just to briefly emphasize, at the Planning Commission hearing on May 4th, the Commission did recommend to extend the existing fee waiver program to all business signs, and that is what the supervisor is looking to incorporate at this time for the temporary 2-year period, which includes or retroactively includes last month for May 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, do we have any questions or comments for the sponsor? Okay, let's go to public comment on this item. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any members of the public present in the chamber that would like to speak to this item? Please line up along the curtain wall. For those members calling in, please dial *3 to be added to the queue. Seeing no in-person public comment, we'll go to our phone lines, where we have 0 speakers in the queue.
Okay, public comment on this item is now closed. Colleagues, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the amendments as proposed by Supervisor Engardio and continue this item to the call of the chair.
Okay. And on that motion to adopt the amendments as presented and continue the item to the call of the chair, Vice Chair Preston?
Aye.
Preston, aye. Member Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar?
Aye.
Melgar, aye. There are 3 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Let's go to item number 6, please, Madam Clerk.
Item number 6 is an ordinance amending the Planning Code to create the Family Housing Opportunity Special District to authorize up to 4 units on individual lots, up to 12 units on merged lots in the RH1 residential house 1 family districts, and group housing in RH1 districts for eligible projects in the special district, and to the Planning Code to exempt eligible projects in the special use district. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment on this item, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. The system prompt will indicate that you have raised your hand. Please wait until the system indicates that you've been unmuted when we go to public comment, and you may begin your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, thank you for considering this item. This legislation I introduced 4 months ago in January and have been working with multiple stakeholders on the West Side and the Planning Department. I do intend to ask you to continue this until July 10th because I'm still working on it. Specifically, this item went to the Planning Commission. It was passed unanimously, and they did have modifications that they wanted me to consider, and I'm still considering those. And also going back to the stakeholders and negotiating with them to make sure that there's consensus of what we're doing. I just wanted to tell you why I'm doing this to begin with. So I represent District 4, which is one of the lowest density districts in our city. And the world is changing. We just passed a housing element that commits us to doing significantly more housing production in our city, much of it on the West Side. Our planet is getting warmer. We need to be connected to transit and to lower our carbon footprint. And we also are seeing a generational change in what people expect from their housing in terms of proximity to transit and their footprint on this earth. I wanted to tackle a couple of things with this legislation. One is our housing production and making sure that we have more housing in San Francisco, but I also wanted to address the specific housing needs of District 7 in the West Side as I see them, which is that we have a lot of folks who purchased their homes, 30 years ago when it was possible to do so on a teacher's salary, a nurse's salary. That is not the case anymore. And we see a lot of folks who live in these homes, their kids moved away, 20 years ago, and they have, 3 or 4 bedrooms, and they're unable to downsize because there's no apartment production on the West Side because the tax code makes it easy for them to stay. And if they want to stay in the communities that they know and love, the easiest way to do is just to stay put. Even though it would benefit them to live in a different unit. So I wanted to do multiple things with this legislation. I think it's a good piece of legislation. It is complicated. We started out with a Domesticity white paper, wanting to have something that was predictable, that also met people's needs. I'm very happy that my colleague, West Side Supervisor Joel Engardio, has co-sponsored it because this affects both our districts the most, although it touches several others. I have been working with folks in the tenants' rights community, folks in the homeowners associations in our district, and the Planning Commission did have a few recommendations for modifications that I am considering, along with our really excellent Deputy City Attorney, Julia Walco. So I'm hoping that can get some language from the city attorney reflecting the modifications that the Planning Commission put forward. I've also heard from my colleagues who are still considering how this will affect them, and I am also happy to take feedback and amendments from them. So with all of that, I want to make sure that we are presenting housing options for folks while at the same time producing new rent-controlled units, mitigating the impacts on existing tenants, and putting forward a path to lower impediments to housing production at the same time as we provide new opportunities for homeowners on the West Side. So with all that, thanks for considering it and for all the excellent work that we've gotten from the Planning Department on this. And I am hoping that you will support me as I make a motion to continue this to July 10th.
we'll go to public comment.
Yes, let's take public comment. And I don't know if either one of you want to say anything about this or reserve. Okay, let's go to public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any members of the public who would like to make public comment on the continuance of this item? Please line up along the curtain wall to your right. For those joining us on the phone, please dial *3 to be added to the speaker queue. Seeing no in-person public comment, we have one caller in the queue to speak online. Mr. Echeverri, may we please have the first caller?
Eileen Bogan will speak on my own behalf, opposing unless amended. The most recent redistricting process created significant changes to the metes and bounds of the 11 districts. This begs the question, is this legislation the logical outcome of that redistricting process? This begs another question. Would the legislation create the perception that District 7 has just colonized District 4, as the chair just stated that she represents District 4? The reference to colonized is from the Peter Coyote essay, San Francisco for Sale by New Owners. How did historically working class neighborhoods in District 4, north of Sloat, suddenly become defined as well-resourced neighborhoods by HCD and the planning department, even though there appears to be no economic analysis and statistics to support this? Is the planning department, along with HCD and ABAG, running out of neighborhoods to decimate? Also, keeping in mind that HCD has become highly politicized under Newsom, and a state auditor report has criticized HCD's RENA process. Despite this, the city seems to be using HCD as a political crutch. In 2018, ABAG and MTC convened the CASA Compact. During a CASA Compact meeting, one of the CASA Compact members stated on the record that the problem is too much democracy. With the housing element and this legislation is the city's message that the problem is too much democracy. I would strongly urge the sponsors of this legislation to delete references to District 4 neighborhoods north of Sloat and focus on District 4 neighborhoods south of Sloat, specifically Lakeshore Plaza Shopping Center. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments today, Eileen Bokens. We're checking to see if there are any additional callers, and there are no additional callers in the queue.
With that, public comment is now closed. And let's take up the motion to continue it, please.
Thank you. On the motion to continue the item to the July 10th meeting, Vice Chair Preston.
Aye.
Preston, aye. Member Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Great, thank you. So that motion passes. Let's go back now to item number 1. Yep, okay. And President Peskin, did you have?
Sorry, my head was still in item number 4, but I can get my head back into item number 1. Let's see, Deputy City Attorney Pearson, where did we leave things?
Deputy City Attorney Ann Pearson, I think where we left things was that as to the original, you were going to move forward to make the amendment to exclude hotels from the conversion and not make the other amendment with respect to signs so that we have a little bit more time to think about that one.
Right, and make the other 3 or so amendments. Okay, so colleagues, on item 1 on the original file to the definitions in 210.5, I read the hotel language into the record, and I would like to make that amendment to the original file. Did we already take that vote? No, we didn't. Okay, Ann says we didn't, so we didn't.
On the amendments to the original file to sections 102 and section 2.10.5, Vice Chair Preston.
Aye.
Preston, aye. Member Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Member Melgar.
Aye.
Sorry, Chair Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Thank you, that motion passes.
Then I would like to duplicate the file as amended and add the language at page 40 to include portions of the C2 zoning district for the existing signage provisions and make the other changes that Mr. Bentliff wanted regarding off-street freight loading and curb cuts for vehicular access that are also set forth in the long title, as well as increasing the threshold for large projects subject to commercial residential ratios in the C3O. And I'd like to make those changes to the duplicated file and then move to continue the duplicated file to the call of the chair and send the original file as amended to the full board with recommendation as a committee report.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So on the motion to amend the duplicated file to add the amendments as read into the record and continue this file to the call of the chair while forwarding the originally amended file to the full board with a positive recommendation.
As a committee report.
As a committee report. Thank you. Vice Chair Preston. Preston, aye. Member Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Okay, now we go to item number 4.
So thank you, Ms. Merloni. Thank you, Deputy City Attorney Jensen. The word business with a capital B on page 4 at line 16. Notwithstanding any other provisions of this code, an awning or business sign existing on the effective date. So we're just adding the word business sign, along with my other non-substantive amendments previously made, designated as significant or contributory. All signs must comply with illumination provisions of Article 6 and by a state licensed contractor or architect or registered engineer that I previously discussed. Those are all non-substantive, and unless Ms. Pierce, don't mess me up.
No, I'm sorry. It's just that we already took a vote on this item, so this is like a further amendment to that
Yes,
original
it is one
file.
further amendment, which is to the original file to say, or business sign existing on the effective date. So it's only the inclusion of the word capital B business at line 16, page 4. Go ahead, say something.
Yes, I'm going to say something. The amendments that I saw that were circulated for this item had proposed to add language to line 17, which said, a sign physically existing on or serving a non-residential business. So I want to make sure that there's no version control problem that you're proposing. That I don't know if you accepted those amendments earlier and you're proposing to add business on top of those.
Well, we didn't, through the chair to Deputy City Attorney Pearson, what we collectively determined in your absence was that putting the word introduction as compared to effective date was substantive. Unless you disagree, in which case I'll put the whole enchilada in right now.
And I apologize for my absence.
Don't
I had to go to
worry.
another meeting, but
If you got the right answer, you can be absent all the time.
Maybe what would be helpful for me to know is what happened with respect to this item. I was familiar with the amendments that had been circulated.
So
I understood that the language that had been deleted was going to be sort of treated in a duplicate.
Yeah, so the 5-year look back we all agreed was substantive. And that would be made to the duplicated file because we want the amnesty program to go into effect as soon as possible. We also had some technical and fee conversation that are not the subject of any amendments, but we agreed could be added to the duplicated file in the future. Then there were the amendments that we already made regarding the state license contractor, the illumination provisions, and the significant and contributory, all recommendations of modification by the commission that we have included. Then we got stuck on the word introduction date rather than the normal effective date, which is 30 days after the mayor signs it. And I think we came to the conclusion that that was potentially substantive. So then we got rid of that entire suggested amendment of physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the introduction. And we abandoned that. And we subsequently replaced it with the defined term in Article 6 of the code, capital B, business sign, and we dropped the physically and the on or serving a non-residential and the introduction words. But if you are telling me that I can have or business sign physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the effective date, I'll put the introduction in later.
Thank you for the recap. I agree that the amendment to make this retroactive to the introduction date is substantive. And so whether you want to make the amendment, making the amendment to add business to describe the type of sign is not substantive if you wish to add that now.
Say it again, the last part of what you just said.
If you did not earlier make an amendment to make clear that the signs we're talking about are business signs, that amendment could be made now and would be non-substantive.
Yeah, and what about the word which Planning Commission also wanted, and I think isn't substantive, physically existing?
That did not strike me as a substantive change, but I wasn't sure what a sign would be if not physically existing.
What about on? Well, there are paper streets, there are paper signs, so you could have something that, I think what they were getting at is you could have an approval on paper, but it didn't actually ever get implemented, as I assume, and Ms. Merloni is nodding her head in the affirmative for the record, so it has to be a physically extant sign, and that is non-substantive, so I'm going to get around to my second amendment to the original file in a second. On or serving a non-residential business, not substantive.
Not substantive, no.
Okay, colleagues, we are so close. My second amendment to the original file is to add the following to subsection B of section 3, or to subsection B of section 187.3, which would read, notwithstanding any other provision of this code, an awning or business sign, capital B, physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the effective date of this ordinance. That is my amendment. And of course, I didn't say it, but it goes without saying that the language in lines 20 through 24 gets deleted. Has existed the same general location with the same general size, construction methodology, all that goes bye-bye.
Okay.
So I will make that second amendment to the original file.
Madam Clerk.
Okay. Let's see, let me make sure I have the amendments correctly. Okay.
Thank you, Council I.
And just for point of clarification, would it be possible to have them rescind the original vote and do it all as one whole, or do it as two separate amendments?
I'm happy to, if you want to rescind our original vote, I'm happy to do the aforementioned or business sign physically existing on or serving a non-residential business on the effective date, add at line 20 designated as significant or contributory, at line 5 on page 5, all signs must comply with the illumination provisions of Article 6 of this code. On line 12, page 5, delete professionally, add by a state licensed contractor, architect, or registered engineer.
I defer to you, Madam Clerk, whatever you think is easiest to reflect in the minutes.
Okay. So just for clarity, I'll rescind it and do it all as one. So to rescind the original amendment to the original file, adopting non-substantive amendments, Vice Chair Preston. Preston, aye. Member Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
And then I would like to duplicate the file.
Wait.
Well, we still
Don't we
need
have
to
to,
do,
we
we're
still
going to
have
do
to
the
vote.
amendments. We rescinded the
We
original.
rescinded the vote, so we
rescinded.
have to
Okay.
amend it.
All right.
Now on the motion to adopt the amendments, including the recently added business in front of signs, up to line 18 where it ends at ordinance. Vice Chair Preston. Preston, aye. Member Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, now, President Peskin.
Now I'd like to duplicate the file, and in the duplicated file have the 5-year look-back language and changing the effective date to the date of introduction and continue the item as amended to the call of the chair. And then I would like to take the first original item as amended and send it to the full board with recommendation. It is not listed as a committee report, sadly.
All right.
Thank you. On the motion on the duplicated file to add the 5-year look back and change the effective date, as well as forward the original file to the full board with a positive recommendation. Vice Chair Preston? Preston, aye. Member Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Chair Melgar?
Aye.
Melgar, aye. You have 3 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Woo. Okay, Madam Clerk, do we have any more business in front of the committee?
There's no additional business ahead of the committee.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.